Her blind date failed, leaving her disgraced. Just then the boss reached out to her, and his actions shocked everyone. The city always pretends it doesn't see heartbreak. It swallows it, buries it beneath noise, lights, and the constant, unforgiving rhythm of survival. But on this particular night, the clouds seemed to pause, as if even they knew something had gone wrong. Inside Castello, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in Manhattan, a young woman sat alone at a table meant for two. Her name was Isabel Cross, gentle, hopeful, a little too trusting, and still holding on to the belief that good things eventually find good people. But tonight, the world wasn't interested in kindness. Isabel had arrived early. She had straightened her dress twice. She had checked her phone 10 times. She had convinced herself every single minute that he was just running late. But as the long hand on the antique wall clock dragged itself past the hour mark, hope slipped quietly out the back door. The wine in her glass grew warm. Her heart grew cold. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that her blind date wasn't the only no-show tonight. Something far more dangerous, far more powerful, had taken notice of her presence long before she realized she'd been abandoned. From the second-floor balcony, a man watched her, a man the city whispered about, feared, and obeyed without question. Don Matteo Esposito, head of the Esposito family, the kind of man whose footsteps could change loyalties, or end them. A man with ice in his voice and shadows in his past. A man who was never supposed to feel anything soft. And yet, here he was, watching a girl who believed she was invisible. He never looked at women in public. He never paid attention to strangers. He never let anything pierce through the armor he'd built from blood, loss, and ruthless ambition. But something about her, the quiet disappointment in her eyes, the way she tried to smile through humiliation, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking, caught him off guard. It shouldn't have. He had faced assassins without blinking. He had stood on burning estates. He had buried brothers, enemies, pieces of himself. But this soft, ordinary heartbreak struck deeper than he expected. The restaurant staff moved carefully around Isabel, offering polite smiles. Some pitied her, some found it romantic, some found it sad, but none of them understood what was truly happening. A woman was being seen by the most dangerous man in New York. Minutes passed. Isabel checked the entrance again, hope now barely breathing. She typed a message, deleted it, typed another, deleted that too. Outside, thunder whispered across the sky. When she finally pushed her chair back and stood, Don Matteo's jaw tightened. Not out of anger, but out of something far more instinctive. A storm was gathering inside him, one he didn't know how to name. Isabel grabbed her coat, wrapped it around herself, and headed for the door, not knowing she had just walked into the path of a man whose attention could ruin her life, or remake it entirely. The moment she stepped outside, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then fierce, as if the sky itself was grieving alongside her. Isabel hurried down the steps, fighting tears, trying to stay composed in a world that suddenly felt so unkind. And in the shadows behind the glass, Don Matteo watched, not possessively, not greedily, but with an intensity that bordered on dangerous, as if fate had just played the opening move of a game he didn't realize he'd been pulled into. The city didn't know it yet, but tonight was the beginning of something irreversible. Tonight, a powerful, feared mafia boss noticed someone he wasn't supposed to notice. Someone soft, someone gentle, someone who didn't belong in his darkness, yet carried a light he couldn't look away from. And once he looked, he could never unsee her again. The rain had a way of cleansing the city, washing lies off the pavement, smearing neon lights across puddles, and softening the edges of the world. But tonight, it felt less like cleansing, and more like warning. As Isabel stepped into the storm, her broken plans dissolving into the downpour, another figure moved quietly behind her, not toward her, not near her, but watching, always watching. Don Matteo Esposito remained inside Castello for a long moment after she left. The restaurant lights touched the sharp angles of his face, highlighting a man carved by danger and dominance, a man who never wavered, never faltered, never cared. But something inside him shifted. A small, uninvited crack, deep, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. He wasn't used to feelings, only control. He gave a brief nod to his men, and the entire room obeyed without a word. Conversations softened. Eyes lowered. The atmosphere thickened with the silent respect reserved only for leaders forged in cruelty and legend. He descended the stairs slowly, each step heavy with the weight of choices he didn't plan to make. Outside, the storm raged harder. Isabel tried to shield herself with her coat, but the rain found her anyway, creeping into her hair, soaking her sleeves, clinging to the remnants of her dignity. She kept walking, one foot after the other, holding on to the hope that her heart would stop aching if she could just make it home. But her sadness didn't go unnoticed. Across the street, two men lingered beneath the awning of a shuttered boutique. They weren't watching the weather, they were watching her. Men like them always waited for nights like this. Empty streets, vulnerable targets, moments where the city turned away and let cruelty slip between the cracks. Their whispers were low, their intentions were lower. Isabel didn't see them, but the man who had been watching her all night did. Don Mateo stepped out of Castello, the storm immediately lashing against his tailored suit. His bodyguards moved instinctively to shield him, but he raised a hand, one silent gesture that commanded the world to stay exactly where it was. He didn't need protection. He was the danger people needed protection from. But tonight, something else demanded his attention. His eyes locked onto the men watching Isabel. He recognized their hunger instantly. Predators smelled like predators. And Mateo? He had hunted men like them since he was 14. A muscle in his jaw shifted, not in hesitation, but in calculation. Isabel didn't hear the footsteps behind her, didn't sense the storm building not in the clouds, but in the mind of the man who followed at a distance. All she heard was the rain. All she felt was disappointment. All she knew was that she wanted to disappear from everyone and everything, unaware that someone had marked her without her permission. The two men stepped forward, not fast, not loud, but with the quiet confidence of those who took what they wanted. Isabel reached the corner and paused to wipe her eyes, her movements small, tired, human. The moment of stillness gave the men their opening, but before they could take another step, the street changed. A presence shifted the air, the kind that froze lungs and silenced instinct. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Behind them, a man stood completely still, dark suit drenched, expression unreadable, power rolling off him like thunder. The men turned slowly, and when they recognized him, their blood turned thin. Don Mateo Esposito didn't speak. He didn't need to. The city had taught everyone the same lesson. His silence was more lethal than another man's rage. One look from him could make a sinner rethink his entire life. One step could end a man's future before it began. The predators backed away, their bravado dissolving into fear as quickly as the storm swallowed their silhouettes. Within seconds, they vanished into the night. Isabel never saw them, never knew the danger, never knew the storm behind her had been diverted by a darker one. She only felt the ache of loneliness, unaware she had been protected by the very man who should have never cared. Mateo watched her continue down the street, his gaze intense, calculating, conflicted. Something unfamiliar burned in his chest. She was nothing to him, a stranger, a fragile, ordinary girl whose heartbreak should have meant nothing. Yet he followed, at a distance that kept him invisible, but close enough to silence anything that dared to get near her. The storm around them roared, but inside Mateo, another storm was beginning, quieter, sharper, far more dangerous. Not to her, to him. Because something was happening he had spent years avoiding. Something he didn't want. Something he couldn't stop. He was beginning to care for a woman who didn't even know his name. And the moment he cared, his world shifted forever. The door to Castello closed behind Isabel, letting in a gust of cold Manhattan air as she stepped onto the rain-slick sidewalk. She clutched her coat tighter around her body, the humiliation of the night still pounding in her chest like a second heartbeat. The cab she had hoped to flag passed her by, splashing water onto her shoes. Behind her, inside the golden glow of the restaurant, Dante Vitale watched her leave. He didn't blink, didn't speak, didn't breathe. He simply watched. as if the world had narrowed to one trembling woman trying to pretend she hadn't been shattered in public. For years, Dante had mastered the art of indifference. He had seen beauty, fear, loyalty, betrayal. None of it had ever stirred more than a passing flicker in him. But tonight, something unfamiliar twisted in his chest. Not rage, not desire. Something older, something dangerous. Possession. He turned to Marco without taking his eyes off her disappearing silhouette. "Follow her," he murmured. Voice low, calm, unquestionable. Marco froze. "Dawn, you want us to—" "Make sure she gets home safely," Dante finished. Then he finally shifted his gaze, pinning his second-in-command with a look sharp enough to slice bone. "And I want every piece of information you can find about her, quietly." It wasn't a request. Marco swallowed. "Yes, Don Vitale." Dante moved toward the glass doors, stopping just short of stepping into the rain. His reflection stared back at him. Dark suit, darker expression. The look of a man who had already made up his mind. She didn't know it, but Isabel Cross had just altered the course of her own life. And his. From that moment on, her footsteps were shadowed, her train ride monitored, her apartment street watched from a distance. Not to threaten her, but to protect something he hadn't even touched yet. When Isabel reached her building, an old brownstone with flickering hallway lights, she let herself in, leaning against the door with her eyes closed. Her blind date, her wasted night, her embarrassment, all of it came crashing down. She let out a fragile breath. She whispered, "Never again." "I'm done with blind hope." But outside, unseen, a black car idled at the curb. Marco sat behind the wheel, giving Dante updates through a single text message. "She's home, alone, safe." Dante read it from the back seat of his own car, fingers brushing over the Vitale crest on his ring, a ring Isabel had recognized, a detail he hadn't missed. She saw him for what he was, even if she didn't yet understand what that meant. He closed his eyes, replaying her face, her voice, the way she said, "I wasn't waiting for you." He had smiled then, and he was still smiling now. A man like Dante Vitale didn't fixate often, but when he did, nothing could stop him. As rain tapped softly against the window, he whispered a single sentence, one that sealed Isabel Cross's fate long before she ever agreed to it. "Find out everything about her. She's not leaving my world now." The car pulled away into the night, a shadow trailing a light, a storm following a spark. Isabel had no idea that a dawn had chosen her. And when a dawn like Dante Vitale chose something, it was never temporary, it was never gentle, and it was never ever optional. If someone this powerful quietly fixated on you after one meeting, would you feel protected or terrified? Morning arrived without mercy. Sunlight spilled through thin curtains, landing across Isabel's face as she stirred awake. Her eyes were puffy from crying, her throat tight, her body heavy with the exhaustion of disappointment. Last night felt distant, yet painfully present. She pushed herself out of bed, unaware that the world outside had shifted around her while she slept. Down the block, a sleek black SUV sat idle, windows tinted, engine quiet. Inside were two of Dante Vitale's men, professionals who blended into any street, any city, any crowd. Their hands rested near concealed weapons, though they didn't expect trouble. Their job was simple. Watch the girl, keep her safe, report everything, not because she was in danger, but because she belonged to a man who had made a silent decision. Dante himself was already awake, already dressed, already working in the shadows of his empire. The Vitale headquarters sat hidden behind an immaculate facade, a towering glass structure that looked clean, corporate, harmless. Inside, it was anything but. The top floor was a silent kingdom built from violence and loyalty, marble floors polished enough to reflect the ghosts of the past. Men in sharp suits moved with unquestioning discipline. Meetings were held behind reinforced doors. Deals were sealed with quiet nods that determined the fate of entire neighborhoods. But today, the Don's attention wasn't on financial power or territorial disputes. Today, his mind repeatedly drifted back to one thing, one woman, one moment. Isabel Cross brushing past him in Castello, unaware of the shift she had caused. He sat at the long obsidian table in the strategy room, flipping through a file Marco had delivered earlier. Every detail had been gathered overnight: her job, her routines, her friends, her apartment, her heartbreaks, her fears. Dante didn't linger on the pages. He absorbed them. He memorized them. He studied her life the way he studied the profiles of men he might have to destroy. Except there was no threat in her. Only softness. A softness he was no longer willing to let the world bruise. Marco stood near the door, waiting for instructions. He knew better than to speak without invitation, but even silence felt heavy today. Dante finally closed the file. "She's alone in that apartment," Marco said carefully. "I know." Dante's voice was low, calm, too calm. "And she's unprotected." Marco hesitated. "Sir, she's a civilian." Dante looked up slowly. His dark eyes sharpened with a warning that needed no words. Marco bowed his head. Understood. The conversation ended there, because Dante Vitale did not explain his decisions. He didn't rationalize them. He didn't ask for approval. He decided. And his world rearranged itself around that decision. While the Don handled his empire, Isabel prepared for her day, completely unaware of the invisible hands guiding the city around her. At the subway station, a pickpocket veered away from her at the last second, intercepted by a silent nod from one of Dante's watchers. A man yelling on the platform quieted immediately when Dante's enforcers appeared beside him. Even the morning rush seemed to part subtly, as if the world was clearing a path for her without her knowing why. Isabel chalked it up to luck, but lucky wasn't the word. Observed, protected, claimed, those were closer. When she reached her small office downtown, she only noticed that someone had sent pastries to the department. No name, no reason. Just a box filled with exactly the kind she liked. Apple cinnamon, the kind her grandmother used to buy. Her coworkers assumed it was from the manager. It wasn't. 3 blocks away, inside a limousine, moving through traffic like a shark through dark water, Dante watched pedestrians blur past the tinted glass. His phone buzzed once. A text from Marco. She arrived at work, on schedule. Dante didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence meant approval. His silence meant everything was going exactly as he intended. The limousine turned, heading toward a secure warehouse near the docks, one of the most heavily guarded zones in the Vitale Empire. Today, Dante had business that required violence, precision, and absolute control. Men would leave that meeting trembling. Some wouldn't walk out at all. But beneath the coldness in his eyes, something warm flickered, a thought, a memory, a glimpse of a girl who felt too gentle for this world. A girl who had been disappointed, abandoned, left alone at a table meant for 2. A girl who didn't know that someone had chosen her. Not romantically, not sweetly, primally, silently, irrevocably. As the limousine door opened and Dante stepped out into the echoing warehouse, every man inside stiffened with fear and respect. But Dante's thoughts were miles away, on a soft voice, a trembling breath, a woman whose world was about to collide with his in ways she could never prepare for. Because in the shadows of his empire, Dante Vitale had already decided she would never walk alone again. The day drifted by quietly, almost deceptively so, as if the universe was trying too hard to pretend nothing was wrong. But the world of men like Dante Vitale never stayed still for long. Not when power was at stake, not when fate began to shift. Isabel left work later than usual, her shoulders tight from hours of paperwork, museum reports, and curatorial tasks. The streets outside were alive with the sounds of New York. Horns, chatter, footsteps, the distant rumble of a train. She wrapped her coat tighter, unaware that someone new was watching her today. A man leaning against a delivery truck, rough jacket, scar across his jaw, eyes that had seen violence and survived it. He wasn't one of Dante's. He belonged to someone else, someone who had noticed the sudden movement of Vitale men in unexpected places, someone who wanted to know who the girl was that Dante had placed under discreet protection. A rival Don, a man hungry for weakness, and Isabel was an unexpected vulnerability in Dante's armor. She stepped toward the crosswalk, fumbling with her phone. The stranger pushed away from the truck casually, blending into the flow of pedestrians. He trailed her with quiet precision. Behind him, two of Dante's watchers shadowed the scene, tense, alert, communicating with the subtlety of men trained to detect danger before it struck. At the next corner, the crowd thinned. The streetlights flickered on. Isabel tucked her phone into her pocket and turned down the block toward her subway entrance. That's when it happened. A hand slammed onto the wall beside her. Another gripped her arm. The stranger stepped into her space with the cold confidence of a predator. "Well, well," he murmured, breath sour with cigarettes. "You're a hard girl to find." Isabel's heart seized in her chest. I don't know you," she stammered, instinctively trying to step back. The man laughed quietly. "You don't need to. I know enough. You're the one he's been watching." Her stomach dropped. "He? Who?" Before she could speak, the stranger leaned closer. "What makes you so special, huh? What did you do to get the Don's attention?" Fear wrapped icy fingers around her ribs. "I don't know what you're talking about." She didn't finish, because suddenly, the man's face twisted. Wind rushed past her. Something heavy hit the pavement with a crack. One of Dante's guards had grabbed him by the collar and slammed him onto the sidewalk before he could even react. The second guard pinned the man's arm behind his back, twisting until bone creaked. Isabel stumbled backward, breath shaking, eyes wide. It all happened so fast, too fast. She watched in horror as the guards pressed the attacker into the ground. Their movements efficient, ruthless, silent. One of them turned toward her, expression hard but respectful. "Miss Cross, are you hurt?" Her voice caught in her throat. How do you know my name?" The guard didn't answer. Instead, he pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece. "Asset compromised. Notify the Don. Now." Those words chilled her to her core. Asset. Compromised. Notify the Don. The world tilted under her feet. The men dragged the would-be attacker to his knees. The stranger's breath came out in ragged coughs, but he still managed a broken laugh. "Doesn't matter," he muttered. "He can't protect her forever." The guards stiffened. Isabel took a shaky step backward, staring at them, at him, at everything she didn't understand. "What is happening?" she whispered. "Why is someone following me? Who—" But she didn't get to finish, because the alley suddenly filled with the low purr of an engine. A black SUV rolled to a stop, the door opening smoothly, and a familiar figure stepped out with the calm, lethal grace of a man who made violence kneel before him. Dante Vitale. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence alone shifted the air. His eyes swept the scene, her shaking breaths, the rival's man pinned to the ground, the guards restraining him, before landing on Isabel with an intensity that nearly stole her balance. He stepped toward her slowly, hands at his sides, voice low. Isabel, just her name, spoken like a vow, spoken like a warning. Her breath trembled. He turned his gaze to the man kneeling on the pavement, and something cold flickered across his face. "Who sent you?" The stranger smirked through blood at the corner of his mouth. "You know who." Dante's jaw flexed once, a subtle, terrifying sign. To Isabel he spoke softly. "You're leaving here immediately." She shook her head, still trembling. I just want to go home." "You can't," Dante said, stepping closer. "You're not safe." Her throat tightened. Why? Why is this happening to me?" His answer was soft, too soft. "Because of me." He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, but she didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, grounding her, steadying her. "You're coming with me," he murmured. "Now." And though fear still pulsed through her blood, she felt something else beneath it. Safety, certainty, a pull she couldn't understand. She whispered, "Where?" Dante's expression hardened with protective resolve. "To somewhere no one can touch you." The streets of Manhattan blurred through the tinted windows as Dante's black SUV carved a path away from the city's chaos. Isabel sat in the back seat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, pulse thrumming with disbelief. One moment she had been standing outside Castello in the rain, and in the next, Dante Vitale, New York's most feared king of the underworld, had taken her by the wrist and said she was no longer safe. She hadn't argued long. Something in his voice made resistance feel pointless. No, more than that. It felt dangerous. The further they drove, the quieter the world became. Streetlights gave way to long stretches of private woodland, and the hum of city noise dissolved into nothing but the whisper of tires on wet asphalt. Finally, the car slowed, then turned onto a long, winding road flanked by tall iron gates. They opened without a sound. Dante's home wasn't a house. It wasn't even a mansion. It was a fortress of glass and stone, perched on a cliff overlooking the dark churn of the Atlantic. Lights hidden in the architecture illuminated the steep angles of the structure, giving it an almost unreal, ethereal glow. As the SUV stopped, Isabel stepped out slowly, overwhelmed. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, something like home, though she wasn't sure what home meant anymore. The ceilings rose high, supported by beams of dark wood, and the windows stretched from floor to sky, framing the restless sea. She felt small and exposed, as if the whole house could see her. But Dante walked ahead of her with effortless command, shrugging off his coat and handing it to a waiting staff member. Several people stood lined along the entrance: security, staff, caretakers. All of them lowered their heads in respect when Dante passed. Yet when Isabel entered their line of sight, they looked at her with curiosity, gentleness, almost approval. Dante didn't introduce her. He didn't have to. The silent message was obvious. She is with me. A woman in her 50s with soft silver hair approached. Her name was Rosa, and she served as the estate's caretaker, though the way she looked at Dante made it clear she had practically raised him. Rosa smiled warmly at Isabel, taking her coat with delicate hands. "Your room has already been prepared," she said softly. "The Dawn wanted it perfect." Perfect. For her? The thought unsettled Isabel more than she admitted. Dante gestured toward the staircase. "Come," he said. "You need rest." She followed him up to the second floor, where he opened a door to a room that could have belonged in a luxury magazine. Soft cream-colored walls, thick blankets, a fireplace already lit, and fresh flowers arranged on a polished wooden table. Flowers. For her. How did you know lilies were my favorite?" Isabel whispered. Dante's expression didn't waver. "I pay attention." The words slipped under her skin like heat. He stepped closer, not enough to touch her, but close enough for her to feel the electricity between them. "You're safe here, Isabel," he murmured. "No one can reach you, not the man who stood you up. Not the people who watched you suffer tonight. Not even the rivals who think they can use you to get to me." Her breath caught. Rivals. That word echoed in her mind. "What does that mean?" she asked. Dante's gaze softened, only slightly. "It means you're in my world now. And my world is full of dangerous men who make stupid choices. A beat. But I don't lose anything I claim." Her heart stumbled. He realized what he'd said, and a small, faint smirk tugged at his mouth. "Get some sleep," he said, stepping back. "Rosa will bring you food. And if you need anything at all, just say my name." He closed the door gently behind him. But Isabel didn't sleep at first. She wandered through the room, touching the blankets, the hand-carved dresser, the soft rugs. Everything felt carefully chosen, purposeful, safe. She wasn't used to safety, not real safety, not the kind that wrapped around her ribs and held her breathing still. Hours passed quietly. At some point, she drifted to the window, watching the moon break through clouds and paint silver across the ocean. She felt suspended, torn between fear and fascination. Behind her, the door opened slightly, not fully, just enough for a warm glow of hallway light to spill in. Dante stood there, his silhouette framed by gold. He wasn't checking on the house, not his guards, not his world. He was checking on her. Isabel didn't move. Neither did he. For a long, still moment, they simply watched each other across the quiet space, two people from different universes forced into the same orbit. Then Dante's voice broke the silence. "Sleep well, Isabel." He closed the door again, but she knew, without a doubt, that he would stay awake until he heard her breathing settle into dreams. Because Dante Vitale never allowed danger near what he protected. And tonight, he was protecting her. Would you feel safer, or more afraid, being protected by someone as powerful and dangerous as Dante? Morning broke quietly over the Vitali estate, washing the cliffs in a pale gold glow. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the world smelling like wet stone and salt. Isabel woke slowly, wrapped in the softest sheets she had ever touched, her body sinking into the warmth and stillness of the room. For a few seconds, she forgot where she was, forgot the world she'd been pulled into, forgot the powerful man who'd brought her here. But then reality slid back into place, sharp, cold, and breathtaking. She sat up, brushing a strand of hair away from her face as she listened to the faint sounds of the mansion awakening. Doors opening, staff walking. The distant rhythm of men training on the lower terrace. Life in Dante Vitali's world moved with discipline, precision, purpose. And she, somehow, was now part of its orbit. A soft knock broke the silence. The door opened, revealing Rosa carrying a tray of breakfast. Fresh fruit, warm pastries, eggs, tea. Everything arranged with care, as if Isabel were royalty, rather than a stranger pulled into danger. "Good morning, dear," Rosa said kindly. "The Don asked that you eat before he speaks with you." Isabel blinked. "He asked." "Oh yes," Rosa said with a smile. "He's been awake for hours, pacing the house, checking the perimeter. He pretends it's business, but—" She paused, her smile softening. "You unsettle him, child. In a way no one has in years." Isabel's breath caught. Before she could question that, Rosa left her to eat. But breakfast was barely touched before another knock sounded, firmer this time. The door opened. Dante entered. He looked different in daylight, less shadow, more clarity, but no less magnetic. He wore a black shirt rolled to his forearms, revealing veins, muscle, and the quiet command that lived in his every movement. He stopped a few feet from her. "You slept," he said. Not a question, but an observation he seemed strangely relieved by. "I did," Isabel replied carefully. Dante nodded once, then gestured for her to follow him. "Walk with me, there are things you need to understand." She hesitated, but only for a heartbeat, before she rose and followed. He led her through the mansion's long corridors, past walls decorated with oil paintings and shelves filled with old leather-bound books. Finally, they stepped onto a balcony overlooking the ocean. The wind tugged gently at Isabel's hair, and below them, waves crashed against jagged stone. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dante's voice broke the silence, low, steady, but charged with something she couldn't name. "You're here because last night put you in danger, not by accident, not by coincidence." A pause. "I was meant to meet someone at Castello, a contact, a trader looking to sell information about my family. When you sat at the wrong table, you became a target." Isabel felt the blood drain from her face. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I know," Dante replied. "You weren't supposed to be there. You weren't supposed to get tangled in this." Another pause, then softer. "And you weren't supposed to look at me the way you did." Her heart kicked. Hard. Dante exhaled slowly, as though fighting something inside himself. "I tried to ignore it," he continued. "I tried to walk away. But when you left that restaurant and another man touched you," his jaw tightened. "Something inside me broke in a way I didn't expect." Emotions swirled through Isabel. Fear, confusion, something dangerously close to longing. "What are you saying?" she asked. Dante turned to face her fully. "I'm saying that protecting you isn't just business anymore. A beat. It's personal." The wind stilled. The waves seemed to hush. Even the air felt suspended. Isabel opened her mouth to respond, but Dante held up a hand. "There's more you need to hear." He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that warmth radiated from his body, sinking into her bones. "My enemies will assume you matter to me now. That gives them leverage. It puts you at risk, and it forces me to make decisions I never intended to make." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "What decisions?" He looked at her with a rare vulnerability, one that felt almost sacred. "To keep you close," he murmured, "to keep you protected." Another step. "To keep you where I can see you." Isabel's pulse raced, but then his expression hardened again, his world's reality settling over his features. "You can leave," Dante said quietly, "if you want. If you choose that path, I'll give you a new name, a new life, a new place to disappear. No one will find you." Her breath hitched. Or His voice dropped, deep and dangerous. You can stay, in my house, under my protection, under my rules, knowing that once you step into my world, there is no turning back. The ocean roared below them, as if echoing the weight of the choice. Isabel's chest tightened. Stay, or disappear, safety, or freedom. Dante watched her like a man bracing for impact. But beneath the intensity, there was fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of pushing her away. Fear of wanting her more than he should. The dawn of New York's strongest mafia family stood before her. And for the first time in years, he looked uncertain. And in that moment, Isabel understood something that would change everything. This man, this dangerous, powerful, untouchable man, had just confessed more than he ever intended. If you were Isabel, would you walk away for safety? Or stay in Dante's world, knowing you might never escape? The balcony fell silent after Dante's confession, the wind tugging gently at Isabel's clothes, as if urging her to move, forward or backward, toward danger or away from it. The ocean churned below like a restless creature sensing a coming storm. Dante stood perfectly still, watching her with that same impossible mixture of control and conflict. His hands were behind his back, but tension radiated through every line of his body. He was a man braced for loss. Isabel swallowed, her mind spinning. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she trusted the way he had pulled her out of danger. She trusted the way he had watched over her. She trusted the way he hadn't touched her, even when every muscle in his body had said he wanted to. That restraint said more than any lie he could ever tell. Slowly, she lifted her chin. "I'll stay," she whispered. The wind seemed to pause. The waves stopped their rhythm. Even the house itself felt like it exhaled with her. Dante didn't move at first. It was as if he needed a second to confirm he'd actually heard her right. Then something subtle, barely there, shifted in his expression. Relief, raw, powerful, immediate. But just as quickly, he buried it. "You understand what that means?" Dante asked, voice low. "I do," she said. His eyes searched hers, looking for fear, looking for regret, looking for any hesitation he could use as an excuse to push her away. But Isabel held steady, and that steadiness undid him. For the first time since she'd met him, Dante looked away, just slightly, toward the ocean, as if admitting he cared was harder than facing the entire criminal underworld. Finally, he spoke. "Then you'll stay where I can protect you," he said quietly. "Starting today." His voice dropped into something deeper, something darker. "And starting now." He escorted her back inside the mansion, his pace slower than usual, as if matching hers, guiding instead of pulling. The halls felt different now, less foreign, less terrifying, more hers. But when they reached a set of double doors on the lower floor, Dante stopped. 2 guards stood on either side, stone-faced and alert. "This wing is off limits to everyone except me," Dante said. "And from today onward, you." He opened the doors. Inside was a large office, his private command center, floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive desk of dark walnut, leather chairs, files, screens, maps, weapons, subtle, elegant, but unmistakably lethal. This was the heart of his empire, and he had brought her into it. Isabel stepped in slowly, feeling the weight of power in the room. The air felt charged, as if the walls themselves were waiting. Dante walked past her, stopping near his desk. "You'll be here when I'm conducting business," he said. "Close enough for me to keep an eye on you, far enough that you aren't exposed to anything unnecessary." Isabel frowned. "Business?" He met her gaze evenly. "The kind of business that keeps this house standing, keeps this city from falling apart, and keeps enemies from getting near you." There was no apology in his tone, no shame. Dante Vitale didn't hide who he was. "You think I can just sit here?" Isabel asked quietly. He softened, just barely. "No," he murmured. "I think you can survive here." Before she could answer, the doors burst open. Antonio, Dante's right-hand man, rushed inside, breath sharp, face tight with urgency. "Don Vitale," he said, voice low, strained. "We have a problem." Dante didn't turn to him immediately. His eyes remained on Isabel, assessing her, protecting her, anchoring her. Only when he was sure she was steady did he shift his attention. "What kind of problem?" Dante asked. Antonio hesitated, glancing at Isabel. "It concerns her." Dante's jaw clenched. "Say it," Antonio exhaled. "The man you were supposed to meet at Castello. He wasn't acting alone. A beat. They know she's here, boss. They know she matters to you." Isabel's breath froze. Dante's expression transformed. The softness disappeared. The restraint vanished. Every wall went back up at once. He became the Don again. "How did they find out?" Dante demanded. "Someone inside our circle is leaking information." Dante's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. "Find the traitor." Antonio nodded and hurried out. The room fell into heavy silence. Isabel's pulse thudded painfully against her ribs. "They know I'm here," she whispered. Dante turned toward her fully, slow, controlled, intent. "They know you matter," he corrected. "That's different and far more dangerous." Isabel swallowed hard. "I didn't want to make trouble." "You didn't," Dante said, stepping closer. They did. Another step. "That means the rules change now." "What rules?" she breathed. He was inches away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "My rules," Dante murmured. His eyes darkened. "And rule number 1 is simple." He leaned in, not touching, but devastatingly close. "No one touches what's under my protection." The air trembled. Her heartbeat thundered. "Not even you?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Dante froze. Something fierce flickered across his eyes. Desire, restraint, danger, and something painfully human. Finally, he stepped back. "Especially me," he murmured. But the tremor in his voice exposed him. And for the first time, Isabel realized Dante wasn't just protecting her from his enemies. He was protecting her from himself. If someone like Dante kept you safe by keeping his distance, would that make him more irresistible or more dangerous? By the time night settled over the Vitali estate, the atmosphere inside the mansion had changed. The staff moved quickly but quietly. Guards paced with sharper eyes. Every locked door felt heavier. Danger had a shape now, a name, a direction, and it was pointed at her. Isabel felt it in the way shadows lingered behind corners, in the way whispers stopped when she walked into a room. Every instinct told her she was standing in the middle of a storm she couldn't see yet, but Dante could. Dante felt every shift, heard every tremor. He didn't show it, not on his face, not in his voice, but his presence had changed. He was coiled, controlled, a blade sheathed but ready, and he kept her close the entire evening, almost too close. If he left a room, he expected her to follow. If she slowed, he fell back to match her pace. If someone walked by, his hand hovered near her lower back, guiding her away from danger she couldn't see. It wasn't possessive, it was protective, a different kind of ferocity. And Isabel didn't know whether to feel safer or more terrified. Hours passed until Dante finally led her into one of the smaller sitting rooms, a quiet place lit by a single fireplace, the flames flickering gold across the walls. The room felt intimate, almost suspended outside of time. "Sit," Dante said gently, motioning toward the couch. She did. He remained standing a few feet away, hands behind his back, shoulders tight with unspoken tension. "You're quiet tonight," Isabel said softly. "So are you," he replied. "I'm thinking." "I know." His gaze burned into her. "About leaving?" he asked. She blinked, startled. "No, not at all." That admission landed hard. His posture changed, not much, but enough that she felt it. A fraction of tension eased from his shoulders. His jaw unclenched. Something softer flickered in his eyes. "Good," he murmured, but the moment didn't last. A sharp knock sounded on the door. Dante's expression darkened instantly. Antonio entered. "Boss," he said tensely, "we found something." Dante stepped toward him. "What?" Antonio hesitated, glancing at Isabel, uncertain whether to speak in front of her. "She stays," Dante ordered. That single command hit Isabel like a shockwave. Not a request, not a suggestion, a declaration. Antonio exhaled. "All right. Then she should hear this." He set a small black device on the table, a listening bug. Isabel's blood ran cold. It was found under your bedroom window, Antonio said. Someone was watching her, listening. Dante didn't move for a full 3 seconds. Then, he exploded. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was far more terrifying. His voice dropped to a level colder than ice. Who put that there? We don't know yet, Antonio said, but it had a high-range transmitter. Whoever used it wasn't close. They were somewhere off the estate. Dante turned slowly toward Isabel. Did you hear anything unusual today? He asked. His voice was surprisingly calm. Too calm. She shook her head. No. Did anyone come near you? Just Rosa, and one of the guards near your office. He asked if I needed anything. Dante froze. What guard? I didn't get his name. Antonio cursed under his breath. That's the problem, Dante growled. Every real guard knows she isn't to be approached. Isabel's stomach twisted. You mean, he wasn't one of yours? Dante didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. The danger wasn't outside the gates anymore. It was inside, in the house, in the walls. Isabel's breath hitched in fear. Dante crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped to one knee in front of her, not touching her, but close enough that the heat of his body steadied her trembling. Listen to me, he said softly, intensely. No one will hurt you, not while I'm breathing. His jaw tightened. And not while they fear me. But fear wasn't the problem now, not for him. It was anger, pure, lethal anger. I should have seen this coming, Dante muttered. I should have tightened security earlier. I should have... Dante, Isabel said gently. This isn't your fault. His head snapped up, eyes blazing with conflict. No, he whispered. But it becomes my fault if I don't stop it. She swallowed. What happens now? Dante stood, regaining that impossible authority he carried like a second skin. We locked down the house, he said. No one in or out without my authorization. Antonio nodded and rushed out. Then Dante turned back to her. You're not sleeping in that room tonight. Why? She whispered, though she already knew. Because someone got close enough to watch you, he said. And I don't take chances with what's mine. Her breath caught. The room felt warmer, smaller, charged. Your guest room is too exposed, Dante continued. Too many windows, too many blind spots. Then, where do I sleep? He hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then, here. Isabel's eyes widened. In your room? Yes. But you'll take the bed, Dante added quickly. I'll take the chair. It's not about proximity, it's about protection. Isabel felt something inside her chest twist. He wasn't asking, he wasn't flirting, he wasn't manipulating. He was protecting her with every drop of power he had. And for the first time, she saw the cost of that protection in his eyes. Fear, not for himself, for her. Come, he said softly. He offered a hand, not touching, just waiting. Isabel stared at it for a long, breathless moment. Then she placed her hand in his, and Dante's entire body reacted, subtle, controlled, but real, as if her touch struck straight through the armor he'd spent a lifetime building. And as he led her to his private chambers, past guards, past locked doors, past the shadows hiding enemies, Isabel understood something with absolute clarity. This wasn't just danger anymore. This was personal. This was intimate. This was the beginning of something neither of them was ready for. But both of them were already falling into. If someone risked everything to protect you, even sharing their room to keep you safe, would you trust them more, or fear how deeply they cared? The night in Dante's private wing felt different, quieter, sharper. Danger pressed against the mansion walls like a living thing, and yet, inside his room, everything was still. Too still. Dante had insisted she take his bed. Isabel protested. Of course she did, but he shut that down with a single look. A single sentence. You sleep where you're safest. That's my bed. He took the armchair in the corner, one hand on his gun holster, the other resting on his knee. Watching, listening, waiting. Not for sleep, but for threats only he imagined before anyone else. Hours passed. The fire burned low. Isabel drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. It must have been close to dawn when soft voices stirred her awake, low, hushed, coming from just outside Dante's door. She recognized one immediately, Antonio, and the other, Dante. He spoke quietly, but with the weight of a man deciding the fate of an entire battlefield. Isabel eased from the bed and stepped toward the doorway, stopping just before the threshold. The light spilled across the carpet, and she stayed hidden in the shadows. It wasn't eavesdropping, not intentionally. But once she heard her name, she couldn't stop. "She's shaken," Antonio murmured. "You sure bringing her here was smart?" "She wouldn't have survived a single night in Manhattan," Dante replied, voice low and dark. His words hit Isabel like a blow. "Survived?" "She's not built for this world, Dawn," Antonio continued gently. "Neither was I," Dante said. A beat of silence, then Dante exhaled, slowly, heavily. "She should hate me for dragging her into this," he murmured. "She should be terrified. She should run." But she didn't. "No," Dante said quietly. She stayed. Isabel felt her pulse flutter. Antonio's voice softened. "Boss, you're different with her." Dante didn't answer at first. Then, "I know. You care about her." "I do." The hallway fell silent. Isabel's heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. Dante continued, voice quieter than she'd ever heard. "When I first saw her at Castello, she looked like she was trying so hard to stay composed, so determined not to break." A pause. "That kind of strength, it's rare, Antonio. It's beautiful." Antonio let out a slow whistle. "Damn, you've got it bad." Dante gave a humorless, almost painful-sounding laugh. "She doesn't know what she does to me." Isabel covered her mouth with her hand, her breath trembling against her palm. "I can't lose focus," Dante said, more to himself than anyone. "I can't afford it. Not now, not with enemies circling." "And yet," Antonio countered, "you moved her into your room." Dante didn't deny it. "She's the only thing in this house I'm afraid to lose." Isabel's knees nearly buckled. Fear, love, obsession, protectiveness. How could one man hold so many dangerous emotions at once? Antonio's voice softened even more. "What's your plan for her?" Another long silence. "She's my future," Dante said quietly. "My only future." Isabel's breath caught, too loud, too sudden. A floorboard creaked beneath her foot. Dante froze. Then the doorknob turned slowly. Isabel scrambled back from the doorway, her heart hammering. But Dante saw her instantly, standing in the dim light, hair falling around her face, eyes wide and shimmering with the truth she'd just learned. He stepped toward her, controlled but shaken. "How long have you been up?" he asked softly. Her voice barely worked. "Long enough?" A quiet curse slipped from his lips. "That wasn't meant for you to hear." "I know," Isabel whispered, "but I heard it anyway." They stood inches apart. The mansion around them felt miles away. The danger outside didn't exist, not in this moment. "Isabel," Dante murmured, "you weren't supposed to know how deeply I care," she finished for him. He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached up very slowly, giving her every chance to step away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, a feather-light touch, barely there, but it shattered something inside both of them. "I'm not a good man," Dante whispered, "and I don't know if I can love the way normal men do." Her voice trembled. "I'm not asking for perfect." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Then what are you asking for?" She swallowed. "You." That one word hit him harder than any enemy ever had. His breath caught. His eyes darkened. His hand trembled just a little, just enough for her to feel the depth of what he was holding back. But he pulled away first, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. "You need rest," Dante said quietly. "And I need to make sure this house is safe before sunrise." He stepped back, but not far, and not emotionally. Isabel watched him walk past her, every inch of him a war between desire and restraint. At the door, he paused. "Isabel," he said, without turning around, "if you ever heard nothing else from me, remember this." He looked over his shoulder, eyes burning. "You weren't a mistake. You weren't an inconvenience. You weren't a burden, a beat. You were the first good thing to happen to me in a long, long time." Then he stepped out, leaving Isabel breathless, trembling, and completely undone. For the first time since entering Dante Vitale's world, Isabel wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of how much she wanted him. If you overheard someone confess you were their future, would you confront them or pretend you never heard it? The mansion felt different that night. Not louder, not quieter, just charged, like the air itself remembered the violence it had witnessed only hours earlier. Isabel stood at the edge of the long upstairs hallway, her hands trembling slightly, though she kept them hidden behind her back. Down below, the household moved like a shadowed machine, guards taking positions, doors clicking shut, radios murmuring in low, controlled tones. The world had narrowed to this house, this night, and one man whose presence was impossible to ignore. Dante. Hours earlier, he had faced down an assassination attempt, one calculated, brutal, and far too close. Isabel had watched the aftermath from behind him, trembling as men were dragged out, as gunmetal glinted and threats were issued with deadly calm. Now the chaos had settled, but Dante had not. He moved through his home like a storm contained in skin. Isabel saw him from the balcony, a tall, dark shape at the center of his office, hands braced on his desk, jaw clenched, shoulders tight. A silent fury radiated off him, thick enough to choke the room. She hesitated. A normal person might have stepped back, but Isabel was done pretending she wasn't already tied to his world. Slowly, she walked toward the doorway. Inside the office, only one lamp was lit. Its glow cut across Dante's face, revealing the shadows under his eyes, and the dried smear of blood still clinging near his collarbone. It wasn't his. Still, the sight made her chest tighten. "Dante," she whispered. He didn't lift his head at first. When he finally did, his eyes, those cutting, storm-dark eyes, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You should be in your room," he said softly. But the softness didn't hide the command. Isabel stepped farther inside. "And leave you like this? No." A muscle flickered in his jaw. Not anger, not frustration. Something far closer to disbelief. She walked until she was standing right in front of him. The room felt smaller, heavier, as if every inch of space had been drawn toward him. "I saw what happened tonight," she murmured. "I saw how close it was." His jaw tightened again. He looked away. "Close doesn't matter," he said quietly. "I'm still alive." "But you're shaken," she whispered. His head snapped back toward her, not sharply, not violently, just instinctively, like the idea was impossible. His voice dropped, low and raw. "I don't get shaken." But the lie slipped through the cracks. She moved closer, just a breath away now. "You're allowed to be human, Dante." His breath hitched. It was small, but real. A moment of unguarded truth from a man who never gave any. And then, slowly, reluctantly, he sank into the chair behind him, exhaling as though gravity had suddenly tripled. Isabel watched him, her heartbeat drumming with a mix of fear, empathy, and something far deeper. She reached out, hesitant, unsure. Her fingertips touched his forearm. He stilled. The entire world stilled. Dante's voice, when it emerged, was nothing more than a whisper, rough, vulnerable, almost unwilling. "I could have lost everything tonight." Isabel blinked, confused. "Everything?" His gaze lifted to hers. "You." The word struck like lightning, not shouted, not confessed dramatically. Just spoken, quiet, simple, devastating. Her breath stuttered. Dante looked away immediately, furious at himself for admitting it, like he wanted to undo it, bury it, erase it before she understood what he had said. But she understood. Oh, she understood. Moving slowly, she crouched in front of him, forcing him to look at her. "You didn't lose me," she whispered. "I'm right here." Her words seemed to break something inside him, not painfully, but heavily, like a chain snapping after carrying too much weight for too long. His shoulders sagged, his breathing slowed, and for the first time since she'd met him, Dante looked tired, not weak, not defeated, just human. She reached up and gently brushed the dried blood from his collarbone. He didn't flinch. He didn't stop her. He just watched her, eyes drinking her in with an intensity so fierce it felt like a confession all on its own. When she finished, he caught her wrist, not hard, not possessively, but carefully, like she was something precious he wasn't sure he had the right to hold. "Isabel," he murmured, "if anyone ever hurt you—" "They won't," she whispered, "because you're here." A single breath escaped him. Almost a laugh, almost a sob, almost something he would never admit to. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, Dante lowered his forehead until it rested against the back of her hand. Not a kiss, not a claim, just closeness, trust, the kind of vulnerability that only shows itself when the night is too heavy and the walls finally crack. Isabel didn't move, didn't speak, just let him stay there. The mafia world had nearly taken him tonight. But the man beneath it, the man no one else was ever allowed to see, was safe in her hands. And he knew it. If someone this dangerous finally let you see their human side, would you hold on to it or run from it? Morning came, but the mansion held on to the night. Sunlight tried to break through the heavy curtains, but the house only swallowed it, dim and quiet, as if the walls themselves understood what was coming. No footsteps, no voices, just a stillness that clung to the air like breath on cold glass. Isabel woke with a heaviness in her chest, a sense that something had shifted while she slept. And when she opened her eyes, she realized what it was. She was no longer afraid of Dante, not in the way she used to be, not in the way most sane people were. There was danger around him, yes. Death walked behind him like a loyal shadow. But the man himself, the man she saw in the darkened office last night, he wasn't a threat to her. He was the reason she felt safe, and that terrified her more than any rival mafia family ever could. Pulling on a sweater, she stepped into the hall, following the faint sounds of movement down the grand staircase. The early morning chill wrapped around her as she descended, making her heart beat faster with every step. When she reached the bottom, she saw him. Dante stood in the center of the foyer, shoulders squared, coat on, gloves half pulled over his hands. His men hovered nearby, murmuring updates and passing him weapons with clinical precision. But Dante's eyes, those storm-dark eyes, were locked on her the moment she appeared, as if he'd been waiting, as if the world had been holding its breath until she stepped into it. She approached slowly. He didn't look away once. When she stopped a few feet from him, the house seemed to grow even quieter. "Where are you going?" she asked softly. His jaw clenched. He didn't want to tell her, didn't want her to know how close the danger had crept. Finally, he exhaled. "There's someone who still needs to be dealt with," he said. His voice was steady, but she heard the steel underneath. "Last night wasn't the end," Isabel swallowed. "And you're going alone?" His gaze softened, just barely. "You think I'd put you at risk by bringing you?" She stepped closer. "That's not what I asked." His breath stilled. His men glanced away, suddenly pretending to be deaf. For a moment, Dante said nothing. Then he reached out and brushed a fingertip along her wrist, light, fleeting, but enough to pull her heart into her throat. "You shouldn't worry about me," he murmured. "I do," she whispered. Silence, heavy, charged, undeniable. Dante's throat bobbed once as he swallowed. Then he turned to his men. "Give us a minute." They obeyed instantly, moving out of earshot but staying within view, always ready, always watching. The foyer felt enormous now, empty except for the storm brewing between them. Dante looked at Isabel again, and this time nothing guarded his expression. "This life, my life, it isn't built for softness," he said quietly. "It isn't built for moments like last night, or for—" He cut himself off, jaw tightening. Isabel stepped forward, closing the last bit of space between them. "Say it." His eyes flashed. Fear, desire, defiance, but not fear for himself. Fear of her answer. Fear of her being close enough to break him. He took a slow breath. Each word dragged from him like a confession he'd sworn never to make. "If anything happened to you," he said, "I'd tear the city apart." Her heart slammed against her ribs. He wasn't finished. "I've protected a lot of things in my life," Dante said, voice low and lethal. "Territory, power, men who'd die for me, but I've never—" He stopped again. Then he said it. "I've never cared about someone the way I care about you." The words didn't echo. They sank, heavy and intentional. settling deep into the quiet morning. Isabel's breath trembled as she exhaled, not because she was shocked, but because she already knew. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. "Then let me worry about you." Dante closed his eyes for a single, pained beat. When he opened them again, the decision was already made. He reached out, caught her face gently between his hands, and pressed his forehead to hers. Not a kiss, not yet, but something dangerously close. "I can't lose you," he whispered. "You won't." His breath shook, just once. Then he pulled away, gloves tightening, mask slipping back into place. The mafia boss replacing the man for the sake of war. He stepped back. She reached for him. For a moment, he stopped, caught between the life he lived and the woman who made him wish he'd lived another. Then, "I'll come back," he promised, voice steady, absolute. "To you." And with that, Dante turned, the front doors opening as his men fell in behind him. Isabel stood alone in the foyer, heart racing, the echo of his confession still warming the air between the cold marble walls. The storm was coming, but so was he. Would you believe a man like this if he promised he'd come back? Or would you fear it's the last time you'd ever see him? The city felt wrong without him. Isabel stood near the mansion's tall windows as dusk bled into night. Hours had passed, heavy, unforgiving hours, since Dante left to confront the man who attacked him. The guards kept watch, but even they couldn't mask the growing tension. Radios crackled every few minutes. Shadows shifted. The world outside seemed to wait for something terrible, or something miraculous. She kept her hands clasped, as though holding them together might hold him together too. Then, a roar, engines, fast, too fast. The mansion gates clanged open and headlights split the darkness. Isabel froze, breath suspended, heart slamming against her ribs. The vehicle screeched to a stop. The doors flew open, and Dante stepped out, alive, but bleeding. He moved with the controlled power of a man who refused to fall, no matter the cost. His men surrounded him, tense and shaken, but Dante kept walking, straight, determined, toward the house, toward her. Isabel didn't wait. She ran. The cold night air hit her as she burst through the front doors, nearly stumbling down the short steps. Dante stopped when he saw her, his breath fogging in the air, his shirt torn, a dark stain spreading near his ribs. Their eyes met. The world snapped into silence. "Dante!" she gasped. He stepped forward, pain etched across his expression, but overshadowed by something stronger, something fierce, something deeply alive. "It's over," he said softly. She reached him, hands shaking as she touched his chest, his arms, his face, checking, searching, needing to know he was truly there. "You're hurt." "Not enough to leave you," he murmured. The words struck her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. But before she could speak, Dante's knees threatened to give. She caught him, her smaller frame bracing him, holding him upright. His hands gripped her arms with surprising strength, though blood soaked through the back of his shirt. She looked up at him, eyes burning. "You could have died." He didn't deny it. Instead, he lifted her chin with a trembling hand. A man who had faced death tonight. A man who had killed for survival. A man who, right now, was looking at her like she was the only thing anchoring him to the earth. "I told you I'd come back," he whispered. She shook her head, tears gathering. "That doesn't make it okay." His voice dropped even lower. "It makes it true." The mansion staff rushed toward them, but Dante raised a hand, commanding silence, commanding space. And despite his injuries, he held himself with the authority of someone who would never allow fear to dictate his fate. "Walk with me," he said. She blinked. "Now?" "Now." She moved beside him, supporting his weight as they stepped slowly back inside. Guards pressed themselves against the walls, lowering their heads as Dante passed, as if witnessing something sacred, something private. They reached the quiet library, warm, dim, the fire glowing softly. Dante sank into a leather chair, jaw tight as the pain hit him fully. Isabel knelt before him, ripping open the emergency kit kept on the shelf. Her hands moved in frantic, delicate motions, cleaning the wound, wrapping gauze, patching him with a desperation she didn't even try to hide. He watched her. Every shaky breath, every tremor in her fingers, every moment she refused to look away from the blood that proved how fragile he really was. When she finished, she sat back, chest rising and falling too fast. "I can't do this," she whispered. Dante stiffened. "Can't do what?" "This," she said, voice cracking. "Watch you walk into danger. Wonder if you'll come back. Wonder if the next time someone calls your name, it'll be to tell me you're—" Her breath broke. He reached for her hand. She flinched, not from fear, but from pain. Dante froze. And then something inside him snapped open. Something raw. Something vulnerable. Something that had been clawing its way out from the moment he first noticed her in that restaurant. "Then tell me what you want," he whispered. Her eyes lifted, shimmering. "I want you." His breath hitched. "But I want you alive." For a moment, Dante said nothing, just stared at her with a look that held storms, scars, and a lifetime of battles. Then, "You think I don't want the same?" he murmured. "You think walking away from you is easier than facing gunfire?" She blinked, stunned. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a confession that felt carved out of his soul. "You are the first thing I fought for, not out of duty, not out of power, not out of pride, but because I want you in my life." Isabel's breath trembled. He continued, "I will rebuild my world if I have to, change it, redraw every line, burn down anything that threatens you. But I won't lose you, Isabel." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Dante touched her cheek, slow, reverent, afraid. "So tell me," he whispered, "are you staying? Or should I let you go before loving me ruins you?" The question hung between them like fate itself. Isabel took a long, shaking breath. Then she climbed into his lap, not romantically, not seductively, but because she couldn't stand being even 1 inch away from him. She pressed her forehead to his, eyes closing, her hands cupping his jaw with trembling certainty. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered, "as long as you fight to come home to me." Dante inhaled sharply, as if her words had pulled him back from the edge of a cliff. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she was the answer to every war he'd ever fought. And for the first time in his life, Dante let himself feel peace. Not because the danger was gone, but because she chose him. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps me bring you even more emotional, heartwarming stories filled with love, tension, and unforgettable moments. Stay tuned. More beautiful stories are on the way.